Hello and welcome to this lecture on Adobe Photoshop by Eduonics. In this lecture we're going to have a continuation of the blending mode course before, the 20-minute long one, and I'm just going to be using some blending modes. I've already set them up here, some just hastily prepared clipping masks. I was going to make this bee look metal. It's kind of hard because of all the hair, so I was going to opt for something else. But get a shape and get some texture you want to apply to it. I've picked a challenging one, so hopefully that you can pick a more basic one and take all my hints and what I'm doing, and that should be more than enough for a basic, because I'm going to have to do things really rigidly. So I've already made a luminosity blending mode that was this metal to begin with, and luminosity is a color blending mode. It's one of the most colorful in this case, and I want to dull that down a bit. So what I've been doing is I would take this mask right here, it's more developed than this, and I'm going to select it, and before that actually I want to make sure this is on top, and I'm actually going to transform this as a curve because that's the shape of my bee. If you're familiar with vector, you should get these curves right, but it's not what the tutorial is about, so I'm not going to spend too much time on certain parts. I just want you to see what you can do with textures. So I'm going to make the smooth back part of his stinger, or at least the his abdomen, or the end part, whatever that's called. I'm going to make that this kind of shiny metal over top. So hit enter and we'll get back to blending modes. With that selected, I have to invert it, and I would take time to actually invert all of these masks, but all the ones that aren't showing, because I just use them for masks. In fact, I can get rid of these. Control Shift I will invert the selection. So we're cutting the outside away from this metal, and we're going to put a layer mask on there with a black to white gradient. Before we do that, we're going to deselect. Then we're going to put our layer mask on. With just a layer mask, you don't need a selection or anything cut out. I'm going to make this kind of a strong. I'm just going to keep plugging away at it until I get it just how I want it. And I can delete excess or erase it, and I'm just going to erase all the excess aside from the abdomen part, and I can do that easier if I just deactivate layers. It's a great thing about non-destructive editing. Now that I got that, I'm just going to click on the main layer that I've cut out using masks and everything, and I'm just going to cycle through with my mouse wheel Sometimes you know which one it is right off the bat, but oftentimes it's a combination of metal and a gradient. Metal is kind of hard to do too. As you can see, I got the angle a little bit wrong. There, actually kind of got lucky on that one. I'm gonna go find a fire texture now. And before I do that, I'm gonna just set a gradient. And I'm gonna set a metal gradient along the bottom parts. It's gonna be on a new layer. So you'll see that on this layer. So what I've done so far is I've made my original hard light mask. I duplicated it. Right click, go to duplicate. You'll be doing a lot of duplication with whatever you're working on, because I wanted to use this shape again, and that's alt clicking the eyeball will make it so it's the only one that shows up, and if you alt click it again, it'll go back to the way you had it, which is kind of cool. But anyway, as you see, I have a soft light gradient from black to white going up in this direction, so it's darkening everything in a subtle way, and as it gets up to the top, it's adding some light. And then up here I have a hard light of the same thing that's just going to be adding contrast using the same patterns and textures. And a lot of times also you can shift things to get different kind of grains. Then you would just reclip them. But I'm actually at this point I would use a pen to go in there and make the edits. So I'm using my mouse for now. And I started doing that on a soft light layer by mistake, but it's turning out alright. But I might as well start with a new layer right now. So, feel free to paint in your edges to give it whatever effect you need. It's basically the same as a custom gradient. And to take your time, normally I'd spend a little bit more time on the abdomen, making sure the divots are right and all that, or the little creases. I'm going to go ahead with the fire idea for right here. So just to heads up, like when you're looking up images, you want to find things that have contours and shapes that'll correspond well. And that's really the secret of using textures and blending modes. Also, that I'm going to flip this like this. It's a huge image, just gotta wait for it to load. So now that I've got one to start with, it's a black background. I can move it to the front with Control Shift right bracket. The black should be pretty easy to remove with a non-contiguous magic wand. And then now I'm just gonna make it. when you can't see any of the background color in the thing that you're wanting to get and you're sure of it, use color range. So even then it left some on. In which case just zoom in and use it again. And for the rest, I'll just go in and do by hand. Just really quick for a rough version of this. Something like this would require a lot of ingenuity and a lot more time, but hopefully you can see what I'm going for. And we're going to be using some of the light blending modes and some of the dark and contrast blending modes accordingly. Like we used contrast to get these really nice rings to come out, and we're going to use two different, I'm going to separate this into two layers, and they're going to each have one's going to have a black and white gradient going this way, one's going to have one going this way. So I'm on the mask layer of each one that I duplicated. So this one will be on top. And this one will remain on bottom. And on the top one, I'm going to lighten it a little bit. Let me try some of these light modes. Oops. And for that little ending part, I'm going to use the second flame I have. I've obtained a bit of an artifact over here, but that should be pretty easy to get rid of. Like I said, I'm being sloppy. But if you have a simpler object, you want to make a metal apple, it's going to be way easier. And really try to keep these videos 15 minutes or around that time, and it's not enough to do this whole thing, but I can do a little bit of it. I'll probably continue this at a later time. This is interesting. I picked something really challenging. This would take me a few hours to do whatever it is I'm thinking of doing. But now we have two similar shapes and we want them to get lost in each other. And it's just like before, it's a combination of light brush strokes around the areas where they meet, or gradient meshes so that they meet up kind of seamlessly. If you want them to have one half to have one attribute or one blending mode, and you want the other half to have another attribute or another blending mode, then you have to split them up like this, like I did before. And in this case, I'm going to copy this about 3 times and liquefy it. And when that's done, I'll have a bunch of flames because I'll use the liquefy to make it going off in the right directions. And yeah, there's many hours of work left in this, but we have this flame here, we have a little bit of black. We already know a little bit about blending modes, so if you see a screen, because of its fire and its light, that's going to change the direction and the flow using the same exact kind of colors as we had before. This is kind of like when we took the animals, or took the fish and the lock and the other blending mode tutorial, and we put them on top of each other. So as you can see, it can create a nice foundation. Just a lot of these things, since they're the same color, it's kind of like sculpting in a way. And then we just went through the exclusion ones. We're not going to mess with exclusion or color really for something like this. I saw a few good ones here, but I'm actually going to show you one that I have done, not a burning bee or whatever this is. And like I said, it's still got more work, but I think this will be pretty cool. But I'm going to open up some other things real quick and just show you how they're set up. So when I say simple, there's not much simpler than this. You get all your values in. This is for a company, Pi Cards. You get all your values in the flat image. You can make it in Illustrator, Photoshop, what have you. I like to go back and forth between the two. And I take that, I know where all my darks are. I know I have this like differing contrast, so it's going to look good. And then all you need after that is like a little picture of leather, and you just cut it out to be the exact same proportions as your design here. Put your dark layers with your inner shadows and whatever you need, because we're going to give it a beveled look, so it should look that way before you put the texture on. When you put the texture on, you can see it adds a great deal of realism. And it would be the same about putting some finding some linear paper and curving it to the dollars here, putting a drop shadow behind them. It's one solid image, but you know, you could go on forever making this thing realistic. Really simple using textures. I'm always trying to do something exciting, but there you have it. This is a simple soft light, 100%, and it's gray. It's been reduced to grayscale so that it's black and white goes through, and it's not being muddled by color or anything, and things look great with soft light when you do that. But that's it for this lecture, and hopefully that opens your mind up and gives you some ideas for using textures